Do you remember me? Human, your childhood neighbor, whispered the alien girl. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Jason Walker had always considered himself a man of reason, a person who followed the path of logic and avoided any unnecessary complications. His life, though far from extraordinary, was comfortable. He worked as an engineer in the heart of the city, always on time, always focused on his tasks. But something about that day felt off, like the world had shifted just slightly out of place. As he walked home from work that evening, the city around him buzzing with the usual energy, Jason caught sight of someone who made his heart skip a beat. A woman stood on the street corner, her striking figure almost glowing under the streetlights. Her skin was a deep, rich shade of green, unlike anything he had ever seen, and her hair shimmered silver, cascading like a waterfall down her back. She was beautiful, but there was something about her that felt strangely familiar. Jason paused, his eyes narrowing as he tried to make sense of the sense of recognition that washed over him. Could it be? Could it really be? He didn't know why, but his instincts were pulling him toward her, urging him to approach. "Do you remember me, human?" she whispered, her voice a soft melody, as if the wind itself carried her words. Jason's breath caught in his chest. That voice, it couldn't be. The memories flooded back to him, memories he had long forgotten. This was Leora, his childhood neighbor. The same girl he had played with in the yard, the same girl who had disappeared all those years ago, as if she had vanished into thin air. But this wasn't possible. Leora was gone. Or so he thought. "Leora," Jason whispered, his voice barely audible. She smiled softly, the corners of her lips curling just a little. "Yes, it's me, Jason. I've been waiting for you." Jason's mind raced. He had to be dreaming. This couldn't be real. The girl he had known, the girl who had been a part of his childhood, was now standing before him as an alien. The impossible had somehow become reality. His heart pounded in his chest, his mind struggling to grasp what was happening. How is this possible?" he managed to say. Leora's eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, met his. "There's much you don't know, Jason. Much that's been hidden from you. But all of it leads back to me." Jason felt the weight of her words as if they were a puzzle piece he had been missing for years. Everything had been leading him here, to this moment, to this woman who once had been his friend, now standing before him as something more. The city around them seemed to fade into the background, the noise of passing cars, the chatter of pedestrians, all muffled by the overwhelming presence of Leora. She was no longer just the girl he had known, but something much more enigmatic, something he couldn't quite comprehend. "What do you mean? What happened to you?" Jason asked, his voice trembling with the force of his emotions. Leora's gaze softened, and she took a small step closer to him. "It's a long story, one that began long before you and I ever met. But I'll explain everything, Jason. I promise you, everything will make sense." Jason stood frozen for a moment, unable to process the woman standing before him. Leora, his childhood friend, the girl he had known so long ago, was now something entirely different. She wasn't the small, innocent neighbor he remembered. No, this was an alien, with glowing eyes and skin the color of emerald. Her presence was both comforting and disorienting, like a dream that he couldn't quite shake off. As the silence stretched between them, Jason felt a weight in his chest, as though the past and present had collided in a way he couldn't comprehend. "Leora, how is this even possible?" he asked, his voice shaky. Leora stepped closer, her silver hair shimmering under the streetlights. Her expression was calm, yet there was a flicker of something deeper in her gaze. "You were always so curious, Jason. I never thought I'd see you again, but here we are," she replied softly, her voice melodic. "I know this must be overwhelming, but everything you remember about me, it's all true. And everything you don't know, it matters more than you can imagine." Jason swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling into him. He felt a strange mix of relief and confusion. How could this be true? How could his childhood friend, someone he hadn't seen in years, suddenly reappear as an alien? It didn't make sense. But the way she spoke, with such certainty, made him hesitate. What happened to you? Why did you leave? Why didn't you ever come back? Jason's voice was tight with emotion. Leora's eyes softened, and she reached out, her hand barely brushing against his arm. I never left, Jason. I was always there, just hidden. My people, we have the ability to erase our presence from the memories of others. I've been watching over you, even when you didn't know it. I couldn't let you remember me, not yet. There's so much more to our story than you realize. Jason could hardly believe what he was hearing. He had thought of Leora often throughout the years, but he never imagined this. That she was an alien, that she had been part of something bigger. It was all too much. Why now? Why are you telling me all of this now? Jason asked, his voice strained. Leora's gaze turned distant for a moment, as if she was contemplating something far away. Because the time has come. The world is changing, and so is your role in all of this. You're a part of something much greater than yourself, Jason. Your connection to me. It's not just fate. It's destiny. Jason shook his head, still unsure of what to believe. Destiny? What do you mean? Leora took a deep breath, her eyes locking with his once more. You and I, we are linked. Your humanity, your spirit. It's something unique, something that my people need. I've watched you, Jason. You're not just a man. You're someone who can help change the course of history, for both your species and mine. Jason felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He could feel his heart racing, a mix of fear and excitement building within him. He didn't understand what she meant, but the conviction in her voice made him want to know more. I don't know what to say, Jason admitted, his voice low. I'm just an engineer. I'm not some hero. I'm not special. Leora smiled, the corners of her mouth turning up in a gentle expression. You don't have to be a hero to make a difference. You've already done more than you realize. You just need to accept what's been set in motion. Jason's mind was spinning, and for a moment, he felt as though he was drowning in a sea of confusion. How had his life led him to this point? A chance encounter with the girl he had known as a child, now an alien with a purpose that was beyond anything he could have imagined. What do you need from me? Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Leora stepped closer, her presence overwhelming but strangely comforting. I need you to trust me, Jason. I need you to come with me, to see the truth for yourself. There's a war coming, one that will change everything. And I need you by my side when it happens. Jason stood there, still processing the enormity of Leora's words. His mind raced as the weight of her request settled in. A war? A purpose greater than himself? This was more than anything he could have imagined when he left his apartment this morning. Yet, there was something about the way she spoke, the way she looked at him, that made him feel like he had no choice but to believe her. I don't know what to say, Leora. A war? How am I supposed to be part of something like that? Jason asked, his voice uncertain. Leora's gaze softened, and she took a small step closer to him. You've always been more capable than you realize, Jason. Humans have a unique gift, one that my people need. Your ability to connect, to feel, to fight for what's right. It's exactly what we need in the days to come. You don't have to be a soldier. You don't have to be anything other than yourself. Her words, so calm and reassuring, made him feel less like a man on the verge of panic and more like someone who could actually make a difference. But I don't even know what's happening, Leora. Why are you here? What does all of this have to do with me? Jason's voice cracked with frustration. Leora stood still for a moment, her eyes studying him with a look that seemed to pierce through him. I've been watching you, Jason, even when you didn't know. You are a part of something much bigger. My people, we've been hiding in the shadows for a long time, waiting for the right moment to reveal ourselves. And that moment has arrived. You were always meant to be a part of this, whether you believe it or not. Jason felt a knot tighten in his stomach. His life had always been predictable. Work, routine, a quiet existence. Now, everything was being upended. But why me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Because you have the strength to do what others cannot. You have a fire inside of you that will ignite when the time comes. I know you feel it, even if you don't fully understand it yet. Leora's words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. Jason wanted to argue, to ask more questions, but something in the way she spoke, the way she believed in him, stopped him. It was like he could feel a pull, something inside of him that wanted to rise to the challenge, to step into a role he never imagined for himself. What do we do now? Jason asked, his voice quieter than before. Leora smiled, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and determination. Now, we start by getting you ready. The first step is understanding what's at stake. We're not the only ones who've been waiting. There are others who would see everything you know destroyed. But we have time, Jason. We have time to prepare. Jason nodded, the gravity of her words finally sinking in. He didn't know what was coming, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't turn his back on this. He couldn't ignore what Leora was asking of him, not when she had already opened his eyes to a world beyond his own. He wasn't sure how, but he was going to help. What do we do first? Jason asked, his voice steady now. Leora's smile widened, and she reached out, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. First, we find the others. Jason followed Leora through the quiet streets of the city, his mind still reeling from everything she had revealed to him. The world he had known, his predictable, ordinary life, was now shattered, replaced by a reality that was both overwhelming and fascinating. As they walked, Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency in the air, like something important was about to unfold. He glanced at Leora, who moved with an elegant grace, her silver hair flowing behind her, the faint glow of her skin casting a soft light in the darkening evening. She seemed calm, as though she had known this moment was coming all along. Where are we going? Jason asked, his voice breaking the silence. Leora turned to him, her golden eyes locking with his. To find the others, she said simply. The ones who can help us. You're not alone in this, Jason. There are others like you. People who can see the bigger picture, who understand what's coming. Jason nodded, though he still had so many questions. How could he be a part of something so grand, so significant? He had always considered himself just an average guy, someone who worked hard, kept his head down, and lived a simple life. But now, that life felt like a distant memory, and the future seemed filled with uncertainty. How do you know who to trust? Jason asked, his voice filled with doubt. Not everyone will understand, Leora replied, her tone gentle yet firm. But the ones who matter will. They'll feel the same pull you do, the same connection. We don't have to convince them, Jason. We just have to find them. As they reached a secluded part of the city, the buildings began to grow taller, their sharp lines reflecting the city's modern architecture. Leora led him to an alleyway, its entrance guarded by two figures who stood in the shadows. Jason felt his heart rate quicken, but Leora remained calm, walking up to the figures with a quiet confidence. They're with us, Leora said, her voice carrying a quiet authority. The two figures nodded, stepping aside to reveal a hidden doorway. Jason hesitated for a moment, uncertainty creeping back into his mind. But Leora's reassuring presence beside him gave him the courage to step forward. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and they entered a hidden room, dimly lit with glowing panels on the walls. Inside, there were several people, all of them with an air of quiet intensity. They looked up as Jason and Leora entered, their expressions unreadable. This is Jason, Leora said, her voice carrying across the room. He's the one I've been telling you about. One of the figures, a woman with long, dark hair and piercing blue eyes, stepped forward. She studied Jason for a long moment before speaking. You feel it, don't you? She asked. Jason felt the weight of her gaze, and for a brief moment, it was as though she could see into his very soul. He nodded, unsure of how to respond. Yes, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. I feel it. The woman smiled, a knowing expression crossing her face. Then you're one of us, she said. We've been waiting for you. Jason felt a wave of relief wash over him, though it was quickly followed by the realization of just how much he still didn't understand. He was part of something bigger than himself, something that could change everything. But what that change would be, he didn't know yet. What happens now? Jason asked, looking around at the group. Now, Leora said, we prepare. We have a lot of work to do, and time is not on our side. But we can do this, Jason. Together. The room seemed to hum with a quiet energy, as though the very air around them was charged with anticipation. Jason had no idea what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of purpose, something deep inside him telling him that this was where he was meant to be. He wasn't just Jason Walker anymore. He was part of something greater. And whatever came next, he would face it with them, with the others who had been waiting just like him. For the first time in a long time, Jason felt ready to step into the unknown. Jason sat in the dimly lit room, the weight of the moment sinking in. The people around him, the ones Leora had spoken of, were still observing him with quiet intensity. He had expected answers, but now that they were all in front of him, he wasn't sure if he was ready for what was coming next. The woman who had first spoken to him, her piercing blue eyes now fixed on him, gave a nod to Leora. "It's time," she said, her voice calm but firm. Leora turned to Jason, her expression serious. "We need to get you trained, Jason. There's a lot you need to learn, and we don't have much time. The world as you know it is changing, and we need you ready for what's coming." Jason nodded, still trying to digest everything that had happened. His world had flipped upside down in the span of a few hours. He had gone from being an ordinary engineer to a person caught in the midst of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. "I don't even know where to start," Jason admitted, running a hand through his hair. Leora smiled, her golden eyes softening. "Don't worry. We'll guide you through it. The first thing you need to understand is that you have a unique role to play. There are few humans who can understand what's at stake here. Fewer still who have the capability to act when the time comes." Jason met her gaze, unsure of what she meant, but trusting her words. "What exactly is at stake?" he asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. The woman with blue eyes, who had not spoken much until now, stepped forward. "The balance of power in the universe, Jason. The forces we've been hiding from are closing in. It's not just about the fate of your world, but of many others. And we need to stop them before they can destroy everything." Jason's heart raced as her words sank in. He had always known that the universe was vast and full of mysteries, but the thought that his own planet was a piece in a much larger game was hard to grasp. "How do we stop them?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Leora placed a hand on his shoulder, offering him a reassuring smile. "By working together, by trusting each other. We've been preparing for this for years, Jason. And now it's your turn to join us." Jason felt a sudden surge of responsibility flood through him. He had never thought of himself as a hero, but in that moment, he realized he couldn't turn his back on this. There were people who believed in him, and he wasn't about to let them down. "What do I need to do?" he asked, his voice steady now, a resolve forming within him. The woman with the blue eyes spoke again, her tone softened by what seemed like approval. "First, we need to get you prepared, both physically and mentally. The enemy we're up against doesn't play fair. But we have something they don't: humanity's ability to adapt, to fight when it matters. You've got that in spades, Jason. We'll help you tap into it." Jason stood up, feeling a rush of adrenaline. For the first time in hours, he felt focused, ready to take on whatever was coming. "I'm ready," he said, his voice full of determination. Leora smiled, her eyes gleaming with pride. "I knew you would be. We start tomorrow. But tonight, rest. You'll need it for what's to come." Jason nodded, the weight of the responsibility still heavy on his shoulders, but now with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt before. As he made his way to the small bed in the corner of the room, he couldn't help but wonder what the next few days would bring. But one thing was certain: he was no longer just a man going through life, waiting for something to happen. He was part of something far greater, something that could change the course of history, and he would face it head on, with everything he had. Jason woke up the next morning with a feeling he hadn't experienced in years: purpose. The events of the past few days had unfolded so quickly that he could barely keep up. But the uncertainty, the confusion, was gone. Leora had shown him a path, and now he was ready to walk it. He stood up from the bed, stretched, and dressed in the simple gear provided to him. As he looked around the room, he realized that everything was about to change. Today was the first day of his new life. He met Leora and the others in the central training room, a spacious area filled with equipment and holographic displays. The room hummed with energy, the walls lined with strange technology and glowing panels. It was a far cry from the sterile, quiet spaces Jason was used to, but it felt like home in a way. Leora was already there, waiting for him. Her expression was focused, but there was a warmth in her eyes that reassured him. "Good morning, Jason," she said, her voice calm yet confident. "Ready to begin?" Jason nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "Ready as I'll ever be," he replied. Leora smiled and gestured for him to follow her. "We'll start with the basics. First, you need to understand how your body can adapt to the challenges ahead." The training will be intense, but we'll guide you through it. There's no time to waste. She led him to a platform in the center of the room, where another person, a tall man with short-cropped hair, stood waiting. He wore a dark uniform with a symbol Jason didn't recognize. "This is Marcus," Leora said, introducing the man. "He'll be your trainer. He's been working with us for years, and he knows exactly what you need to learn." Marcus nodded at Jason, his expression serious but not unkind. "We're going to push you hard," he said, his voice low but firm. "You're going to need every bit of strength, speed, and agility you can muster. But more than that, you need to learn how to think quickly, how to make decisions under pressure. That's what separates the ones who survive from the ones who don't." Jason felt a flicker of doubt rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. This was his reality now, and he had to rise to the occasion. "I understand," he said, determination flooding his voice. Marcus gave a slight nod. "Good. Let's begin." For the next few hours, Jason was put through a series of physical exercises designed to test his endurance and flexibility. The training wasn't easy. His muscles burned, and sweat dripped from his forehead as he pushed his body to its limits. But with each passing minute, Jason felt his confidence grow. He was learning, adapting, becoming stronger. After a brief break, Leora returned, this time with a tablet in hand. "We've also got mental exercises," she said, her voice steady. "You need to sharpen your mind as much as your body. These exercises will help you learn to read situations, predict outcomes, and make decisions faster." Jason took the tablet from her, feeling a new sense of urgency. He had always prided himself on being logical and quick-witted, but this was different. This wasn't just about solving equations or fixing problems. This was about survival. Over the next few days, Jason continued his training, working tirelessly with Marcus and Leora. Every day, he grew stronger, faster, and more focused. But it wasn't just the physical and mental aspects of the training that changed him. It was the bond he was beginning to form with the others. They weren't just people he had met out of necessity. They were allies, friends. And now, they were a team. As the days passed, Jason started to understand what Leora had meant when she said they were preparing for something big. It wasn't just about physical strength or intelligence, it was about unity. The ability to work together, to trust each other, was the key to their success. And Jason knew, deep down, that he was ready. He wasn't the same man who had walked into this room a few days ago. He had changed, both inside and out. And when the time came, he would be ready to face whatever the future had in store for him and his team. Jason felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, but for the first time in weeks, it wasn't a burden. The intense training had pushed him past his limits, testing both his body and mind in ways he never imagined. He had learned to adapt, to think faster, and to rely on his instincts. But now, as the days passed and the team worked together, Jason felt something else growing inside him: confidence. They had formed a bond, a connection that was stronger than the fear or doubts he had carried with him. Leora had shown him a new world, one where his place was not defined by his past, but by what he was willing to fight for. One evening, after another grueling session, Leora pulled Jason aside. "You've come a long way," she said, her voice warm but serious. "But there's still more you need to understand. The stakes are higher than you think." Jason, wiping sweat from his forehead, looked at her, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Leora's eyes narrowed slightly, as if she was weighing her next words carefully. "It's not just about physical strength or quick thinking, Jason. The real challenge will come when we face the enemy, when we're not just fighting to survive, but fighting for something bigger. For freedom. For the future of your people." Jason absorbed her words. He had thought the hardest part was over, the endless drills, the tests of his abilities. But now, it felt like the real fight was just beginning. "I understand," he said, his voice steady. "But how do we win? How do we even know what we're up against?" Leora smiled faintly. "That's why we need you, Jason. You're not just learning to fight. You're learning to lead, to inspire others. You have a gift, a strength that the enemy doesn't expect. And it's that strength that will turn the tide." Jason didn't fully understand what she meant, but he could feel the weight of her words. There was something inside him, something he had never truly recognized until now, that was awakening. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about fighting for something worth protecting. "How do I start?" Jason asked, his resolve hardening. Leora stepped back, her gaze steady. You already have, by standing here with us. But now, we need to prepare for the next step. You'll be working alongside Marcus and the others, planning, strategizing. It's not enough to be strong. You need to think ahead, anticipate the enemy's moves. Jason nodded, determination filling him. He had never been a strategist, never had to think in terms of larger plans. But now, with the weight of the world on his shoulders, he felt the responsibility settle into place. I'm ready, he said, his voice firm. Leora's smile was small but approving. Good. Now, we move to the next phase. It's time to start putting everything we've learned into action. The enemy won't wait for us to be ready. We have to be ahead of them. And Jason, she paused, her voice lowering. There's something you need to understand. There's a part of this mission that's not just about winning. It's about making sure the enemy doesn't have a future to take from us. Jason's mind raced. What did she mean? What was the true cost of this fight? But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of the answers. He was ready to face whatever came next, ready to step into his role as a leader, as someone who could make a difference. Let's do it, Jason said, his voice full of conviction. Leora nodded. We're in this together, Jason. And together, we'll win. As they moved forward, Jason knew the road ahead would be filled with uncertainty. But one thing was clear. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival anymore. He was fighting for a future. And that was all the motivation he needed. Jason stood in the planning room, feeling the weight of the task ahead. The team had gathered, each person standing in their designated spot, waiting for Leora to begin. The air was thick with anticipation as the final stage of their preparation was about to begin. The war, the battle for the future, was no longer a distant thought. It was real. Leora stood at the front, her eyes scanning the room before she spoke. This is it, she said, her voice calm but firm. We've trained, we've prepared, and now we act. The enemy is close, and we need to move fast. Jason's heart raced. He had come so far since that first meeting with Leora, the stranger who had pulled him into a world he never knew existed. He was no longer the same man who had walked into this building weeks ago. He had learned, adapted, and embraced his role in this fight. But today, as Leora spoke of their mission, the reality of it all settled in. We are going to strike hard and fast, Leora continued, her gaze shifting to the holographic map displayed on the wall. The enemy has infiltrated several key systems, and we need to take control before they do any more damage. Jason, this is where you come in. We've trained you for this moment. Jason nodded, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the map. It showed the locations of key enemy strongholds, their routes, and their points of vulnerability. The plan was simple, but it would require every ounce of skill, strategy, and teamwork they had. What do we need to do? Jason asked, his voice steady. We'll split into teams, Leora explained. You'll lead a small unit to infiltrate the main control center. Your job is to disable their systems, buy us enough time to launch our main offensive. Jason's pulse quickened. The pressure was on him now. This was his first real test as a leader. And the others? He asked. They'll be handling distractions and securing the perimeter, Leora replied. We can't afford to have them focus too much on us. We need to disrupt their operations and keep them off balance while we take control. Jason looked around at the team, each person ready for action. He had trained with them, fought alongside them, and now it was time to lead. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on him. But this time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like his purpose. All right, Jason said, his voice unwavering. Let's do this. The team moved out quickly, following the plan with precision. Jason, leading. His unit, navigated through the shadows of the enemy's stronghold, each step calculated. His mind raced, replaying the training he had undergone, the lessons he had learned. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about making a difference. They reached the control center, and Jason gave the signal to move in. The door opened silently, and they slipped inside, moving like a well-oiled machine. Jason felt his heart pounding in his chest as he focused on the task at hand. Every second counted. As they reached the central control room, Jason paused, signaling for his team to hold their positions. He knew what came next would require all his focus. This was it. The moment everything they had trained for led up to. Jason moved forward, hacking into the control systems with the tools they had provided. The tension in the room was palpable, but Jason remained calm, his hands steady as he worked. Finally, The systems began to shut down, one by one. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. "We're done," Jason said, his voice low but filled with determination. "Let's move." As they made their way out of the building, Jason couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. This was just the beginning, but it was a start. They had made their first move in a war that would shape the future. And as Jason looked at the team around him, he knew they were ready. Together, they would face whatever came next. Jason and his team moved quickly, their footsteps echoing softly as they made their way through the darkened corridors of the enemy's facility. The adrenaline from their earlier success still coursed through his veins, but there was no time to celebrate. The mission was far from over, and every moment counted. Jason kept his focus, glancing at his team members. Leora was beside him, her expression steady, her eyes scanning their surroundings with the precision of someone who had seen countless battles. Marcus, the experienced strategist, moved in sync with them, his mind clearly working through the next steps of their plan. "We're almost there," Leora whispered, her voice barely audible. Jason nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. They had already taken out one of the main control systems, but the enemy was relentless. They couldn't afford any mistakes. As they approached the final checkpoint, Jason felt the weight of his new role settle on him. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was his responsibility to lead these people, to ensure they completed their objective. They had come so far, and there was no turning back now. The sound of distant footsteps reached Jason's ears, a sharp reminder that time was running out. He motioned for the team to move faster, his mind racing through the possible outcomes of their next move. Would they be able to finish the job before the enemy realized what was happening? As they reached the final door, Marcus stepped forward, tapping a series of commands into the nearby console. The door slid open silently, revealing a room filled with enemy soldiers. For a brief moment, everything seemed to freeze. Jason's heart skipped a beat, but then he remembered the plan. This was what they had trained for. He quickly assessed the situation, his mind working on overdrive. "Move in," he commanded, his voice low but firm. His team reacted instantly, moving with precision as they swept through the room, neutralizing the threat with surgical efficiency. Jason's eyes stayed focused on the task at hand, his body moving almost automatically. They were so close. As the last soldier fell, Jason took a deep breath, his mind still processing everything that had just happened. He looked over at Leora, who gave him a small but approving nod. "We did it," she said, her voice calm. Jason exhaled slowly, a sense of relief flooding over him. But they weren't finished yet. They still had to disable the enemy's final defense systems, and that would be no easy task. As they moved toward the central console, Jason's thoughts briefly drifted to what had brought him here. His life, his training, his purpose. Everything had led to this moment, and he wasn't going to fail. They reached the console, and Jason immediately began typing in the necessary codes. The room seemed to grow quieter as he worked, the tension building with every keystroke. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the screen flickered, signaling that the enemy systems had been disabled. "It's done," Jason said, his voice barely above a whisper. The team exchanged quick looks of triumph, but they knew better than to celebrate too soon. "Let's move out," Leora instructed, her voice as sharp as ever. Jason nodded, his heart still racing as they made their way to the exit. The mission was a success, but the war was far from over. Jason knew this was only the beginning, but for the first time, he truly believed in himself. He was part of something much larger than he had ever imagined, and he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.